In this video, I will talk about using association rules to describe the relationship between item sets. Association rules essentially help us to find the likelihood of certain items being purchased together for marketing purpose. So it's also called market basket analysis. Association rules also applicable to other disciplines. For example, they can help medical researchers to understand which treatments have been commonly prescribed together to certain patient symptoms and the resulting effects. Here's an example of a grocery store that would like to find its customers' purchase patterns so they can possibly improve its in-aisle product placement or cross-product promotions. This table contains a small sample of 10 transactions, and each transaction contains the items purchased by a customer in a single visit to the store. Can you spot some of the patterns here? That's right, you may quickly find patterns like bread almost always go with the peanut butter or jelly, but not all the time, or fruit goes with milk. An example of an association rule from this data would be if bread and jelly, then peanut butter. It means that if a transaction includes bread and jelly, then it also includes peanut butter. There are a few concepts in association rules. Antecedent is the item set that correspond to the if portion of the if-then association rule. For example, here for the association rule, if bread and jelly, then peanut butter, the bread and jelly item set is the antecedent. From this table, we can see that the antecedent is 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4. The consequent is the item set corresponding to the then portion of the rule. For example, here, the peanut butter in the example is the consequent. From this table, we can see that the consequent is 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Typically, only the association rules for which the consequent consists of a single item are considered because they are more actionable. Note that the number of possible association rules can be overwhelming, so we typically only focus on the association rules that involve antecedent and consequent item sets that occur together very frequently. So you will wonder, what is frequent? We define the support count of an item set as the number of transactions in the data that include that item set. So the potential impact of an association rule is often controlled by the number of transactions it may affect, which is measured by computing the support count of the items that consists both the antecedent and the consequent. So from this table, we can see that the support count of bread, jelly, and peanut butter is 2. 1 and 2. The rest of them, they're like separate in different transactions. By only considering rules involve item sets with a support above a minimum level, we capture in these rules random noise in the data that can generally be avoided. So a rule of thumb is to consider only the association rules with a support count of at least 20% of the total number of transactions. If an item set is particularly valuable and represents a profitable opportunity, then the minimum support count used to filter the rules can be lowered. How do we quantify the likelihood or probability of association rule? And how do we know how good the rule is? These measures of confidence can be viewed as the conditional probability of consequent item sets occurs given the antecedent item sets occurs. A high value of confidence suggests that a rule in which the consequent is frequently true when the antecedent is true. However, a high value of confidence can be misleading sometimes. For example, if the support of the consequent is high, that is, the item set corresponding to the then part is very frequent, then the confidence of the association rule could be high, even if there's little or no association between the items. We can see that if cheese and fruit in the previous table have a confidence of 1.0 or 100%, this is misleading because the fruit is a frequent item as it was purchased in 9 out of the 10 transactions. So the confidence of almost any rule with fruit as the consequent will have a high confidence. Therefore, to evaluate the efficiency of a rule, we compute the lift ratio of the rule by accounting for frequency of the consequent. So remember that confidence, the numerator of the lift ratio, can be thought of the probability of the consequent item set given the antecedent item set occurs. So the denominator of the lift ratio is probability of randomly selected transaction containing the consequent set. So for the data in the previous table of the grocery shopping, the rule if bread and jelly then peanut butter has a confidence of 2 out of 4, which is equal to 0.5 or 50%, and a lift ratio of 0.5 divided by 4 out of 10 equals to 1.25. So the rule if bread and jelly then peanut butter has a confidence of 50% and a lift ratio of 1.25. So in other words, identifying a customer who purchased both bread and jelly also purchased the peanut butter is 25% better than just guessing that a random customer purchased a peanut butter. That is 1.25 versus 1. Therefore, a lift ratio greater than 1 indicates that there is some usefulness to the rule, and so that is better at identifying cases when the consequent occurs than no rule at all. In other words, a lift ratio greater than 1 suggests the level of association between the antecedent and consequent is higher than would be expected if these item sets were independent. So this table shows the list of association rules that achieve a lift ratio of at least 1.39 while satisfying the minimum support of 4 transactions out of 10 total and a minimum confidence of 50%. The top rule suggests that bread, fruit, and jelly are commonly associated items. And the fourth rule states, if fruit and jelly are purchased, then bread is also purchased. With that rule discovered, perhaps the store could consider promotion and or product placement to leverage this perceived relationship. So we could judge how good is an association rule based on how actionable it is and how well it explains the relationship between item sets, if it is at all explainable. Remember the classic diaper and beer example you probably have heard before, that a store finds that there are 30-year-old-ish male customers who purchase a diaper Friday late afternoon will also tend to buy beer. It is explainable that a young father would be staying at home helping the wife take care of the baby, and he will want to occasionally relax, enjoy a bottle of beer or two. That's why he picks up diaper and beer after a week of hard work. Another example would be that Walmart discovered that if a customer purchases a Barbie doll, and then the customer also purchases a candy bar. The utility of a rule depends on both its support and its lift ratio. Although a high lift ratio suggests that the rule is very efficient at finding when the consequent occurs, if it has a very low support, the rule may not be as useful as another rule that has a lower lift ratio but affects a large number of transactions. That is as demonstrated by a high support. However, association rule with high lift ratio and low support may still be useful if the consequent represents a very valuable opportunity. Lastly, don't forget to check out my other video demonstrating how to perform the association rules using analytic solver.